Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. And with this one, I wanted to bring you my biggest damage discipline priest PvP guide. So I'm going to be covering what talents, what covenant, what legendaries you want to be going after to do the most possible amount of damage you can do on a disciplined priest. I've been really having a lot of fun with this build in particular, and I think that it is most viable and competitive as an option when playing with something like an enhancement shaman, a feral druid, a rat paladin, plus a warrior. These compositions are becoming a lot more prevalent on the ladder. We may even possibly see a meta shift for these types of combinations, particularly the Necro Lord plus Kindred Spirits feral druids. We're seeing a lot of that, and I think that this build would be absolutely stellar with it. It's something that I would love to try. It is a very high risk build because it does a lot of damage, but when you pair up with a warrior that's durable and a hybrid that's able to pick up the slack in regards to healing, then you're going to start to shore up its weaknesses and really start to maximize its strengths. I have yet to see really anybody else running this, so if you're looking for a standard build, this is going to be far from that. I may mention some talents that will make it easier to play if you're a beginner, but this build is completely unique to just doing the most amount of damage possible. So let's just go ahead and take a look at the talents first of all. On the first row, you have Castigation, Twist of Fate, and Schism. I choose to run Castigation, and this is mostly to synergize with Blaze of Light, which we'll get to in a moment. But Penance and Smite are going to be the largest portions of your damage, and I like this for just maximizing the synergies between those talents. Twist of Fate, I've been enjoying in Battlegrounds, but I haven't really found too much opportunities to maximize its effectiveness in Arena. You're not spending a lot of time below 35%. If you're at that point, you're probably already dead. And then Schism might be bogging down the amount of time that you have to really do stuff and initiate damage. And if you get crowd controlled at any moment on it, you're going to lose a lot of burst. And this is about sustained damage at the end of a match as opposed to only kind of single target burst. But those are kind of the options for this row. And I tend to go for Castigation. Looking at the second row, you have some mobility and personal defense. I go body and soul when I want purge protection, and I don't think I'm going to be tunneled by melee DPS. Masochism is where I think I'm going to be tunneled by melee DPS, and this is going to give me extra damage reduction on myself. And then Angelic Feather is where I don't need purge protection, and I don't think I'm going to be a target. I want high mobility to move around and get into better positions to maximize my damage. So you are going to flip between these quite often. On the third row, I'm pretty much running Power Word Solace at all times. This talent is going to give you around 8,000 to 10,000 mana in a game if used effectively, even higher than that if completely min-maxed, and it's very important to manage your mana. The other options are mana management, but I've just found this one to be higher output than the other options at the moment. Now onto the 35 row, we have Psychic Voice. This is the one that I'm pretty much almost always running. It's just going to make your Psychic scream 30 seconds faster. Shining Force can be a good option if you want a surprise attack, and this is particularly powerful against classes with stationary defensives. So things like Resto Shamans, Death Knights, Demon Hunters, Darkness, Anti-Magic Zone, Earthen Wall Totem, and you can knock enemies away from that defense and then catch them totally off guard and blast them. This can be situationally good in those environments, and I do take it for that reason, but Psychic Voice can be a safe cookie cutter lock-in. Sins of the Many is an auto lock-in for PvP. It's just going to increase your overall damage. Pretty straightforward. Purge the Wicked is going to be your highest amount of damage output. Very important to maintain this on as many targets as possible when maximizing your damage. And you will want to note that you want to use Penance to spread it rather than kind of just always spamming it onto multiple targets. So if you're looking and you've got Purge the Wicked on a warrior and you Penance that warrior, it's going to spread it to a nearby target. That's going to save you a lot of mana. It's kind of just an important tip to realize if you're having mana problems on your Discipline Priest, but this is going to be a lot of damage. And then Lenience, which is going to be Atonement, just makes you take a little bit less damage, which is just going to be really good, just overall pad damage reduction. Pretty straightforward auto lock-in for me. The honor talents are where you start to get really creative and flexible for doing damage. The current build that you're looking at, Inner Light and Shadow, I'm playing Inner Shadow at all times. This is going to be just increasing your damage and your atonement healing by 10%, which is important with the build we're running. And threes, I'm running Trinity, so your atonement lasts longer, so you can spend more time doing damage. And Smite, Penance, and Shadow Fiend will have critical strike chances increased by 30% as long as you're maintaining your atonements. And we run Blaze of Light so that the damage of your Penance and Smite is increased, and the Snare is a little bit of an extra bonus. Or you can use the Sprint effect to give yourself a little bit of a boost to get away from the engagement. And this is where the high risk comes. This is why I like playing these three, is because it just will give you a huge amount of pump. But if you are really struggling against something, let's say like Rogue Mage Priest, you may want to swap Trinity out because you're going to be crowd controlled a lot and you won't be able to maximize your damage. And it will be likely better to run Dome of Light. This will give you another major defensive cooldown to survive a go from the Rogue Mage Priest. But if you're fighting something with like a lot of melee pressure, just constant damage is coming out, double range DPS, you can really min-max your damage here to get a ton of atonement healing and save your mana and do just a ton of damage. If you are really kind of struggling and you are new to Priest and you want to kind of like baby step your way into this build, I would recommend running Dome of Light and Ultimate Radiance. This way you're going to have the instant healing to fall back on. You're going to have the very powerful cooldown to be able to tank a little bit of damage, and this is going to be kind of the training wheels version of stepping up into the maximum damage version of it. I choose not to run Dark Archangel only again because it's during that one specific cooldown window. The main purpose of this would be just to maximize your sustain damage. If you wanted to maximize your burst, you probably would run Dark Archangel. Lining this up with the Necrolord banner from a warrior, lining this up with the Kindred Spirits of a Feral Druid could be very devastating, but I just like pumping all the time, which is the main reason I run this. But if you wanted to do that, that would be a kind of a swap-in viable option for you to do. Now looking at Covenants and Conduits, I am usually running Natya, pretty much locked in on these talents at all times. So the Covenant specific Conduit, which is just going to make your mind games more effective, and I'm running Venthyr, although I have been experimenting with Night Fae, and I think Night Fae may actually be more competitive because it's going to allow you to get into deep dampening games with a huge amount of mana, and I'm going to experiment more with that. So if you'd like to follow along live, twitch.tv/Supatease, streaming every day at 11 a.m. PST, and we can see how that goes because it is a lot of mana the last time I tried it, but I needed to give it a little bit more time before I was confident with it. But for this build, which is just maximum damage output, big numbers on your screen, topping the meter type of deal, Shattered Perceptions, this is just going to be increasing your mind games damage. We have to take Agent of Chaos. We're going to run Clear Mind for Purge and Dispel mana cost reductions because it's just way too valuable. There's too much value on it. Translucent Image for the Endurance Conduit. This is going to increase or make your Fade add extra damage reduction, which is really important for surviving. And I choose damage reduction over the healing options just because it's not affected by dampening. You'll always get the full value of damage reduction. And then Exaltation, which is going to be your Rapture lasting longer, and your Power Word Shield is going to be increased. This makes your Rapture a lot better of a cooldown so that you won't necessarily have to overlap your cooldowns. Sometimes if you don't have this conduit and you Rapture, it might not feel like it's that powerful and you have to use pain suppression with it. This allows Rapture to stand as its own as a cooldown to flip between enemy cooldown windows, which is really important. And then you automatically get some interrupt reduction. Then I go for the Swift Penitence, which is the damage or healing of your first bolt of penance is increased by 48%, because once again, we want more penance damage. We want as much damage as possible. It turns penance into a good pick-me-up as well as an emergency heal if you're running away. Then we're going to go down to the Nimble Steps, which gives you that auto root proc, which is really important. And then at this time, I have just the kind of passive, when you take damage, you're going to heal a little bit, because pretty much all of these are very similar to each other. It's just this one will just be automatic. You'll have it at all times. And I'd rather have that than have to really worry about thinking about it too much. And then Fatal Flaw, which is important for getting your maximum damage output, because when your haste effect ends, gain 10 seconds of either crit versatility, and versatility is going to be what you get, and it's going to pump up your damage. When you get this haste proc, it's going to feel like you have power infusion, so you're going to have like double power infusion, which is why I really like this build. The interrupt reduction is important for spam casting, because as this build, you are going to be APMing your butt off. You're going to want to be, like StarCraft 2 Pro APM if you want to run this build and have it be effective. But my fallback, if you're, again, more of a beginner, you want to ease your way into this build, would be to run Theatar. And this is, again, with the 8 Instant Radiance build that I was talking about. And the main reasons for that is because this conduit tree will allow you to keep the Instant Radiance, and you can actually flip this in and out if you want to use Instant Radiance in a specific matchup, but then want to go into the big damage build in a different one. So with Theatar, you want the Clear Mind, most value. You want the Mind Games one, most damage output. You want the Greater Fade one, because highest value. The Penitence one, because we want big penance damage. Then we want the Radiance Healing, because this is very important to synergize the two. If you don't have the Conduit plus the Honor talent, that Instant Radiance will be a lot less effective. Then we go down into Psychic Scream. Movement speed is reduced. Again, this is like the emergency peeling one. So if you have to fear DPS off yourself, snaring them a little bit to try and escape is going to be a lot of value. And you will want to make sure that you pick up your T. It may be better to run General Draven in the future, which I haven't set up just yet, just because this T buff, if you're switching them, won't actually persist, and you will lose it. So if you are running this kind of beginner training wheels build, you'll likely want to just stay Theatar, and you'll likely want to stay the instant radiance build in all of your matchups. Practice Discipline Priest for a while until you're comfortable with it, and then you'll get to a point where you really don't feel like you even need the instant radiance, as long as you're playing with those hybrid melee DPS, because they'll be doing the healing surges that will basically be replacing that radiance for you, and then you can just focus on pumping out damage and healing with Atonement, and you will just be getting a ton of pressure out onto the scoreboard. And you'll be able to accomplish a lot in your game. So we covered conduits, we covered talents, gear, pretty standard as most classes are. You're going to want to go for haste versatility gear, pick up crit wherever you can't find that. I opt for the proc trinket again for more sustain, more haste. And then legendaries you can get creative with. At the moment, I have Sephuz on this character. Again, I jumped right back into it recently now that you can play alts again. Sephuz is like a good kind of cheap pick-me-up one, but the one that I'm actually thinking that I want to be able to get in the future is going to be, where is it right now? The Crystalline Reflection, which is just going to be powered shield, will heal the target for a bit and also reflect some damage and be really powerful during the Rapture cooldowns. So almost like thorns from a druid. I'm thinking that I'll be able to get a lot of extra damage from this one, so I'm likely going to have to go after it to really try and experiment with that one. But if you have that one already, I would actually suggest that you run this one and maybe run Sephuz into Rogue Mage, where you're expecting to be crowd controlled a lot of the time and not getting a huge amount of value out of it. But this one seems really interesting for the build that I'm specifically running, and I'm going to have to go after it, try and get it unlocked. Seeing that drops from a dungeon, so I'm a little bit worried about it. But other than that, that's my thoughts on the legendaries. That's my thoughts on the covenants, the conduits, my thoughts on the talents and the honor talents, so that you can basically build your big damage priest that I've been talking about in my previous videos. If you like this type of content, if you want to stay up to date with all of the patch changes going on with the game so you can make the best decision to enhance your experience with World of Warcraft, make sure you hit the subscribe button, because I am uploading those patch notes as soon as they happen, and I'm dumping a bunch of these guides on you as well. So you might get you might pique your interest in playing something different or checking something out that you might not have thought of. That is the main purpose of the channel, to be a resource for you to enhance your experience with the game. And other than that, thank you very much for watching the video, and I will see you in the next one.